One early evening, a sharply dressed black man was driving home after work when flashing blue lights flooded his rearview mirror. A white officer pulled him over, sneering with baseless accusations. The tension escalated when the officer violently smashed his side mirror for no valid reason. But what he didn't know, this wasn't just any driver. And tonight, he was about to teach that officer a lesson he'd never forget. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The sun had just begun its descent behind the skyline of downtown Atlanta, streaking the buildings with burnt orange and casting long, lean shadows across the bustling city streets. Cars honked in scattered rhythm, pedestrians crossed corners with their grocery bags and cell phones, and somewhere far off, a street saxophonist played a soulful melody that got lost in the hum of rush hour. But inside a sleek black Lexus gliding along Peachtree Street, everything was calm. Silent, almost, except for the low murmur of smooth jazz spilling from the speakers. Marcus Green adjusted the volume knob ever so slightly, letting the sax fade to background. His fingers, long and graceful, rested on the steering wheel with casual precision. He was dressed in a dark navy suit, tailored to perfection, a matching silk tie knotted neatly at his collar. His skin was deep brown, smooth, and illuminated faintly by the dying sunlight filtering through the windshield. There was a quiet gravity to his presence, the kind you'd associate with a man who never raised his voice, but always got the room to listen. He wasn't rushing. In fact, he'd deliberately taken the scenic route home from the federal office downtown. It had been a long day of back-to-back briefings, field complaint reviews, and policy drafts, more politics than justice, really. He needed the drive to clear his head, maybe even stop for a bite. But that small piece shattered the moment he rolled through an amber light that flashed red just as he crossed the intersection. The blaring sound of a siren pierced the air behind him. Blue and red lights exploded in his rearview mirror. Marcus's brows furrowed ever so slightly, his jaw tightening for just a second, not in panic, but in recognition. He pulled over with practiced calm, his blinker clicking twice before the vehicle rolled to a stop at the curb. His hands stayed visible on the wheel, palms resting flat. He'd done this dance before, too many times. The police cruiser came to a hard stop behind him, the tires screeching louder than necessary. A white male officer emerged. Mid-30s, stocky, with a buzz cut so close his scalp showed pink. His badge glinted against the setting sun, and his jaw was tight with something that looked like impatience. Or maybe hunger. Not the kind for food, but control. "License and registration," he barked, approaching the driver's side with heavy, thumping steps. Marcus rolled down the window smoothly, saying nothing at first. He met the officer's eyes, calmly, directly, but did not smile. There was no warmth in the exchange, just restraint. He reached slow and deliberate for the glove compartment. "I'm retrieving my registration," he said, his voice smooth, level. "Everything's up to date." The officer, name tag reading Jensen, leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing as if trying to read into Marcus's soul. "You know why I pulled you over?" His tone carried more accusation than question. Marcus turned back, handed over the documents without flinching. "Not entirely sure," he replied. His voice carried the softness of someone used to measured words. "Perhaps the light?" "You didn't come to a full stop," Jensen snapped. "That's illegal." Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly but nodded. "Understood. I thought I slowed in time, but if I misjudged it, I accept that." But Jensen wasn't listening. He was watching, studying, judging. His gaze was no longer on the license, but on Marcus himself, his suit, his tone, his confidence. That was the problem. The confidence. There was something in Marcus's composure that unsettled men like Kyle Jensen. "You're not from around here, are you?" the officer asked, leaning into the open window, the smell of sweat and chewing gum clinging to his breath. Marcus answered without hesitation. "Recently relocated from D.C., my address is on the license." Jensen's lip curled slightly. He took a step back, held the license up like it was a fake ID from a college kid. Then, without warning, he struck the side mirror with his open palm once, hard, cracking the casing. A second later, with a grunt, he kicked it at the hinge, snapping it clean. The mirror dangled like a broken arm. Marcus inhaled sharply, jaw clenching, his fingers tightening against the wheel, but still, he didn't move. His voice came out lower now, measured but laced with warning. "Was that really necessary, officer?" "You giving me attitude now?" Jensen smirked, eyes flaring with something far darker. "Car looks suspicious, could be hiding anything, standard protocol." Marcus didn't answer right away. He blinked slowly, controlling the rising heat in his chest. He had trained for this, for years, studied these moments. He knew exactly what this was. But right now, he wasn't Marcus Green, Federal Oversight Director. He was just another black man on the side of the road with a broken mirror and a badge in front of him that didn't see humanity, only threat. Jensen stepped closer again. "Step out of the car," he said, one hand now resting firmly on the butt of his holstered weapon. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Marcus stared at him for a moment longer, then exhaled through his nose. Quiet. Controlled. He reached slowly for the door handle and pushed it open. As he stepped out onto the pavement, the sounds of the city carried on behind them, indifferent. A child laughed somewhere in the distance, a car stereo thumped. Life moved on. But here, on this sidewalk in Atlanta, something had shifted, and Marcus could feel it deep in his bones. He wasn't angry, not yet, but he had questions, and Officer Jensen wasn't ready for the answers. Marcus stood motionless on the curb, the broken side mirror still swaying behind him like a wound left open. The sting of the officer's aggression hadn't faded, but his expression remained unreadable, a mask of composure forged through years of silent endurance. He shifted his weight slightly, one polished dress shoe stepping onto the warm asphalt. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't raise his voice. But inside, a slow burn had started. Officer Jensen circled the car like a predator, eyes darting back to Marcus with every few steps. "Open the back door," he ordered. "Pop the trunk, too, and step away from the vehicle." Marcus didn't move. His voice, low and steady, cut through the air like steel through cloth. "Is there a specific reason for this, officer?" Jensen stopped. His eyes narrowed. "I said step away from the vehicle." There was no explanation, no probable cause, just volume and intimidation. When Marcus didn't comply fast enough, Jensen closed the distance with 2 heavy strides and shoved him hard against the hood of the car. The sudden contact jolted through Marcus's back, flattening his chest to the warm metal. The officer pressed his palm against Marcus's shoulder blade, keeping him there with force. Marcus clenched his jaw, his cheek resting against the hood, the vibrations of the still-running engine buzzing faintly beneath him. He didn't resist. But his voice, when it returned, was sharp and unmistakably controlled. "If I were white, in a suit, driving this same car, would you still be acting this way?" Jensen said nothing, but his grip tightened. The pat-down began, rough, fast, unprofessional. The officer's hands dragged along Marcus's back, down his thighs, lingering a moment too long as if daring him to react. But Marcus remained still, letting the silence speak louder than any protest. "You seem awful calm," Jensen muttered, finishing the search. "Most people would be nervous right now." Marcus turned his head slightly, locking eyes with him. "Confidence isn't the issue here, officer. Respect is." There was something in Marcus's tone, measured, deliberate, devoid of fear, that unsettled Jensen. He stepped back, blinking as if trying to recalibrate the power dynamic he thought he controlled. "You think you're smarter than me?" Jensen asked, voice growing tight. "You think that calm attitude is going to get you out of something?" Marcus stood up straight now, brushing his jacket back into place with smooth, slow movements. "No, officer. I think transparency gets everyone home safe." The response hit like a backhand. Jensen took a quick, unstable breath and stepped closer again, his face now inches from Marcus's. "People like you always try to twist things around. You act polite, like you've got nothing to hide, but I know better." Marcus's gaze sharpened, his brow lowered by a fraction. "People like me?" He repeated the words slow, like they carried weight. They did. For the first time, Jensen hesitated. He opened his mouth as if to explain, but no words came. The phrase hung in the air like the thick Georgia heat, heavy, damning. Marcus stepped forward, not aggressively, but deliberately, and spoke softer now. "You didn't say it, officer. But we both know you almost did." Jensen's eyes darted, his mouth tightened, his hand instinctively brushed the edge of his holster again, but Marcus didn't even flinch. The man in front of him wasn't scared. He wasn't even angry, not in the way Jensen was used to. There was something else radiating off of him. Authority. And it was making Jensen nervous. "You know an awful lot about how this works," Jensen said, trying to regain footing. "You a lawyer or something?" Marcus let the question hang, then gave a faint, unreadable smile. Or something. That answer, too vague, too controlled, only pushed Jensen further. "I don't like being played," he snapped. "And I don't like being profiled," Marcus replied, voice calm but with a distinct edge now. "Yet here we are." The silence that followed was electric. The power had shifted, subtly but undeniably. Jensen knew it, and he didn't like the feeling of being one step behind. His eyes flicked back toward the patrol car, then back to Marcus. He was searching desperately for something to reassert control, but there was nothing left to reach for that wouldn't expose him further. For Marcus, the choice to remain calm wasn't weakness, it was tactical. He could see the fear building behind the officer's eyes now, not fear of violence, but of consequence. Jensen didn't know who he had just tried to humiliate, but he would soon. Marcus took a slow step back and adjusted his cuffs, his tone suddenly heavier. "You've escalated this stop beyond reason, officer. You damaged my vehicle, you put your hands on me without cause, and now you're trying to fish for something that isn't there." Jensen stiffened. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not going to work." "I'm not playing a game," Marcus said quietly, "but you are, and you're losing." The finality in his tone silenced even the buzzing traffic behind them. Jensen swallowed hard, unsure what to say next. Marcus glanced down at his wristwatch, then back up, his gaze direct. "We should probably clear this up now before things go any further." With those words, he reached slowly, deliberately, toward the inside of his suit jacket, and what he pulled out would not just change the trajectory of this stop. It would change Jensen's entire career. Jensen's hand twitched near his holster as Marcus slowly reached inside his suit jacket. The air between them thickened with unspoken threat, and for a heartbeat the only sound was the chirping of crickets echoing from a nearby field. Marcus didn't flinch. He moved with the same calculated grace he had maintained throughout the entire encounter, even after being shoved, searched, and humiliated. His fingers gripped the edge of a worn leather wallet. He paused for half a second, eyes never leaving Jensen's face. "I am reaching for my identification," Marcus said in a clear, measured tone. "No sudden moves. I want you to see exactly who I am." Jensen's jaw locked. His eyes tracked every inch of movement like a predator unsure whether to pounce or retreat. But the authority in Marcus's voice stopped him from making a mistake. There was something undeniable in the way Marcus spoke, calm, unwavering, and completely in control. It wasn't defiance. It was certainty. With a subtle flick of his thumb, Marcus flipped the wallet open and held it out at chest height. Gleaming in the soft amber light was a gold badge, polished, official, and instantly unmistakable. The words engraved beneath the seal read, "Department of Justice, Director, Federal Oversight, Civil Rights Division." Jensen's face went blank. He blinked once, twice. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked at the badge, then at Marcus, then back again, as if trying to reconcile the image of the man he'd just shoved into a car hood with the title staring back at him. You're, he stammered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Yes," Marcus interrupted, his tone clipped, not unkind, but not forgiving. Marcus Green, Director of Federal Oversight for the Civil Rights Division, DOJ. He let the words land one by one, deliberate as a judge's gavel. Jensen took a step back, the color draining from his face. His hands, once bold and forceful, now hovered awkwardly at his sides, unsure what to do with themselves. He looked like a man caught walking blindfolded into a courtroom, realizing too late he was the one on trial. "I don't carry weapons, officer," Marcus said, his voice low, steady, unblinking. "I carry responsibility." There was no anger in his tone, only gravity. The kind of gravity that didn't need to shout to be felt. He returned the wallet to his jacket with the same precision as a surgeon finishing a final stitch. Then his eyes met Jensen's again, sharp and unyielding. "You destroyed my mirror," he continued, quieter now. "But the real reflection you should worry about isn't on the outside of my car." He let that line hang, letting Jensen feel the full weight of its meaning. Jensen didn't move. His breathing had changed, faster, shallower. The look of dominance had faded completely, replaced with something far more familiar to Marcus, guilt laced with panic. I didn't know," Jensen tried, his voice thin and fading. "No," Marcus said softly, cutting through his stammering. "You didn't know. And that's exactly the problem." A beat of silence passed, heavy as thunder before a storm. The officer shifted his feet. His eyes darted toward the street, the trees, the parked cruiser, anywhere but Marcus's face. He was unraveling, and he knew it. "I don't expect you to remember every name in government," Marcus said, folding his hands in front of him. "But I do expect you to remember your oath, and today you failed it." The shame in Jensen's expression twisted into something like desperation. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just thought—" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You thought I was just another black man in a suit, driving too nice a car, talking too calmly, being too confident, and that threatened you." He didn't say it cruelly, just plainly, like reading a fact from a report. "You assumed that meant I didn't know my rights, that I didn't belong in your world." The officer flinched, just barely. His chest rose and fell with quiet regret. But he didn't dare interrupt. Marcus stepped forward, not to intimidate, but to reclaim the space that had been stolen from him. "Do you understand how dangerous that assumption is?" he asked, not rhetorically. His voice remained low, but each syllable hit with surgical precision. "Not just for me, for every citizen you interact with in that uniform, for every young man who doesn't have a badge to hold up when you cross the line." Jensen's lips parted, but no words came. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't condemn him further. Marcus took one final look at the officer before stepping back toward his car door. His voice, though calm, had gained a distinct finality. "This isn't the end of this conversation. You'll hear from me again. Not as a man you pulled over, but as the man who decides whether you deserve to wear that badge." Jensen's body stiffened. His eyes widened slightly as the implication settled in, not just that he'd made a mistake, but that he'd made it in front of someone with the authority to change his future. As Marcus opened his door, he paused, resting one hand on the frame, and looked back one last time. His tone softened, but the message was clear. The badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you accountable to everyone. And with that, he slid back into the driver's seat, closing the door with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any siren. Jensen remained frozen on the curb, watching the car idle, then slowly pull away, his confidence shattered and his fate uncertain. But for Marcus Green, the real work had only just begun. The next morning, the sun poured through the tall windows of the DOJ Atlanta field office, striping the floor of Marcus Green's office in bands of gold. The city outside was already buzzing, horns, sirens, and heat. But in here, the air was still, almost reverent. Marcus sat behind his desk. His suit jacket hung neatly behind him, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow. A steaming cup of black coffee sat untouched beside a manila folder, thick with pages. The name printed at the top in bold all caps was one he wouldn't soon forget. Jensen, Kilm. He flipped the folder open with quiet precision. The first page was a complaint, dated 4 months ago, from a young black college student. Stopped for no reason, accused of drug possession, no evidence found, released after vehicle search. The officer listed Jensen. Next page, a middle-aged Latina woman, stopped on the way to work, dashcam mysteriously unavailable, excessive language used, no disciplinary action. And again, Officer Kyle Jensen. Marcus read every word, his eyes scanning without blinking. His fingers tapped once, slowly, against the edge of his desk. It wasn't just what Jensen had done to him the night before. It was what he had done before, and what he had been allowed to get away with. This wasn't about one stop. It was about a culture that allowed a man like that to wear a badge for as long as he had. There was a knock at the door. Linda, his assistant, stepped in with her usual brisk efficiency, holding a stack of reports. Morning director, weekly review briefs, and the Deputy Attorney General's office left a message they're expecting an update by Friday. Thanks, Linda, Marcus said, his tone calm but clipped. He took the reports from her hand but didn't look up. I also need you to schedule a meeting with the Internal Investigations Division, today, mid-afternoon. She paused, sensing the shift in energy. This about the officer from last night? Marcus's eyes finally lifted. Yes, and it's not just about him. Linda nodded once and stepped out, closing the door gently behind her. Marcus leaned back in his chair, letting the silence settle before he spoke, this time to the empty room. How many more like him are out there? The question wasn't rhetorical, it was fuel. Later that afternoon, in a glass-paneled conference room on the 5th floor, Marcus sat across from Chief Regional Officer Damon Ellis, a broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair and the air of someone who'd spent decades learning which battles to fight and which to bury. Marcus didn't flinch under his gaze. I read your summary, Ellis said, tossing the file onto the table between them. You want a full departmental audit. You're going to rattle a lot of cages with this. Marcus's reply was immediate. Let them rattle. Because the silence, the way we've been handling complaints like these, that's protected the wrong people for too long. Ellis raised an eyebrow. You really want to go public with this? Yes, Marcus said, and I want to start inside, with our training programs, our supervisor reviews, our field complaint protocols. I want to know how many officers like Jensen are still out there, untouched. Because no one wanted to deal with the politics. Ellis leaned back in his chair, arms folded. You're asking for a full systemic review. You understand what kind of resistance that invites? I'm not interested in being liked, Marcus replied. I'm interested in being right. The room fell quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound between them. Then Ellis gave a slow, almost reluctant nod. All right. You'll have what you need, but don't expect it to be clean. When you stir the pot, the worst parts float to the top. I'm counting on it, Marcus said flatly. By week's end, the first internal interviews had already begun. Field supervisors were summoned, records were pulled, an email was sent to the Community Liaison Board inviting residents to a series of open forums for law enforcement accountability. Marcus didn't delegate the work. He attended the first session himself, sat in the back, listened, took notes. No suit jacket, no badge, just presence. And in the weeks that followed, as reports came in and stories surfaced, Marcus began to see the true scope of the problem. Jensen wasn't an outlier. He was a symptom of a broader infection buried deep inside the enforcement culture. And Marcus had no intention of treating symptoms. He was there for the disease. At the center of it all, Jensen's file remained active. His misconduct hearing was scheduled. He'd be facing formal review, this time, with someone sitting across from him who had not only seen his worst behavior firsthand, but held the pen that would decide his fate. But Marcus wasn't after revenge. That had never been the point. He wasn't interested in making an example of Jensen. He wanted to make change inevitable. As he sat in his office one evening, watching the sun dip again beyond the skyline of Atlanta, so much like the night this began, Marcus opened his notebook and wrote 7 words across the top of a blank page. This isn't about one bad cop. It was about the system that let him exist unchecked. 2 weeks later, the community center on Auburn Avenue was filled beyond capacity. Rows of folding chairs stretched wall to wall, the crowd a mosaic of faces, black, white, brown, old, young, residents and reporters alike. Some wore suits, some wore hoodies, but all shared one thing: a quiet, urgent expectation. On the stage stood a wooden podium bearing the seal of the Department of Justice. Beside it, a projection screen displayed the words, Public Oversight and Reform Forum, Georgia Division. Marcus Green adjusted the mic slightly. The room settled. Conversations dropped to whispers, then to silence. He stood tall in a charcoal gray suit, his shirt crisp, his face calm but unyielding. The same calm that had disarmed a police officer in the street now commanded a room full of lawmakers, civil rights activists, and local citizens waiting for a reckoning. He began without pleasantries. 2 weeks ago, Marcus said, his voice clear, I was stopped at a traffic light like any one of you might be. No crime, no cause, just a light, and a man who saw my skin before he saw my humanity. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others looked down, visibly affected. That man didn't know who I was, Marcus continued, but that's not the point. The point is, it shouldn't matter. He stepped away from the podium and walked slowly across the stage, making eye contact with the audience, letting the words breathe. For far too long we have tolerated a culture where the badge has been used as a shield, not for protection, but for prejudice, where silence is rewarded, where misconduct is minimized, where trust is broken and lives are lost. He paused, then returned to the mic, his voice deepened slightly, steadier. I'm here to say that silence is over. There was no applause, just stillness, respectful, listening. Marcus pulled a thin folder from beneath the podium and held it up. This, he said, is a 137-page internal review of Georgia's law enforcement oversight. It outlines patterns of profiling, gaps in accountability, and systemic failures that go back decades. He lowered the folder. And this is just the beginning. Now the audience leaned in, some blinking hard, others crossing arms, faces set with determination. I won't name the officer from my encounter, he said, because this isn't about him. This is about the culture that allowed him to become what he is. A culture that didn't question how many stops he made without cause. A culture that dismissed community complaints as noise. A culture that taught him that authority meant power, not service. He stepped forward again, softer now. But let me be clear. A broken mirror can be replaced, but if we don't fix the culture that shattered it, we'll keep walking through broken glass forever. There it was. A hush swept the room. One elderly woman in the second row wiped a tear from beneath her glasses. A younger man in the back clenched his jaw, gripping the back of a chair with white knuckles. The metaphor landed exactly as Marcus intended. Not as poetry. He continued, voice rising with purpose. That's why, starting next quarter, every police department in this state will undergo federal compliance training. Every officer will be retrained in civil rights law. Every community board will be given direct access to our oversight team, and every complaint, no matter how minor, will be reviewed by an independent body. No more silence. No more looking the other way. Now the audience stirred. People leaned forward. Phones came out to record. Journalists scribbled faster. The moment had shifted, from sorrow to action. Marcus scanned the crowd once more. This isn't about dismantling police, he said. This is about rebuilding trust. It's about reminding every officer that the badge on their chest isn't a weapon. It's a promise. A promise to protect, a promise to listen, a promise to serve everyone. He paused one last time. I believe in justice, not just the kind that locks up bad people. The kind that prevents good people from being hurt in the first place. The kind that heals communities before they break. The kind that doesn't just punish. It transforms. A thunderous applause erupted. People rose to their feet. Some cheered, some cried, but none remained untouched. Marcus stepped back from the podium, not to bask in it, but to let the moment belong to the people. Because this wasn't just a speech. It was a beginning, a turning point, and he wasn't finished. As he walked off stage, the camera flashes began, reporters surged forward. But Marcus didn't stop. He moved through the hallway toward the exit, the noise fading behind him. He wasn't walking away from the spotlight, he was walking toward the next fight, because real change didn't end with applause. It began after